What's up, guys? This is Zach with Top Deck Nation, and today we're going to be looking at the top 8 decks from St. Louis Regionals. So, if you don't know, just a few weeks ago, there was a regional championship in St. Louis, and specifically, I believe it used the expanded format, which is currently black and white on. So, as you can imagine, just a ton of sets, a ton of deck diversity, card choices, strategy, that sort of thing. So, yeah, today I'm just going to be going over the top 8 decks. So I think there were over 700 people at this event. So, these are definitely the best of the best here. These players just kind of went the extra mile. They lasted so many rounds the first day and the second day, and they finally made it to the top 8. And what's different about this season compared to some other seasons is that there's a lot of prize money and things like that at stake. So definitely a shout out to them, a big congratulations to them. But first of all, we're going to kick it off with the champion. It was Alex Wilson, who actually piloted this Mega Rayquaza build. And it's really surprising to hear that, a Mega Rayquaza deck of all things won, regional championships. It's definitely better in expanded because you gain things like Execute, Jirachi, Battle Compressor, stuff like that. But, in a field full of things like Night March and Eviltal, where you can't really evolve into Mega Rayquaza because of Archeops, definitely a really interesting play, a very risky play, but obviously it paid off. He won, so congratulations to him. But as you can see here, this is the list, and this is straight from Pokemon.com. You can check out all of these top 8 lists as well as other events and things like that. So I will link it in the description below, so check that out. Really awesome that they're doing that. But yeah, this is pretty much the list here, guys. It's really straightforward. As I said, you gain a lot of things compared to standard, notably things like Jirachi EX. So now you can kind of search out any kind of supporter that you need. So basically your Ultra Balls and computer searches become like supporters. So that's really good. Execute is great because you can suddenly battle compress it, and then your Ultra Balls, your computer searches, they cost less. But more importantly, it pairs really, really well with Skyfield. There's some obvious synergy there. So if my opponent has to discard, if they play like Perilous City or a different stadium, I can discard the egg, and then when I put out Skyfield again, just played on the egg again. So I have seen players play as many as 2 of these in this deck, but I think 1 is kind of like the sweet spot. It's just enough so you can actually get it out and use it when needed. So otherwise, this is really straightforward. It gains Dragonite. That pull-up ability is really sweet, especially if you've been Perilous City'd or having to discard Shamans. It's really going to let you reuse those cards. And an interesting tech card that Alex chose here was Giratina. So it has this ability called Devour Light, and it says each Pokemon break has no abilities. Now, this is really just kind of like a hard counter against anything. I don't know if Pokemon just doesn't like break cards or they just really prefer these big basic EXs and GXs, but Giratina essentially shuts off things like Trevenant Break and Greninja Break. So to be honest, it kind of sucks because I really love the break cards. I thought Greninja was just a fantastic card. Obviously, it's been kind of outpowered and everything by Decidueye GX, which is a far better option. But it is interesting that he played this, and it probably put in some work against things like Trevenant. I don't know how much play Greninja really sees anymore in Expanded because things like Archeops and especially Decidueye now. But definitely a really interesting tech choice, and I'm sure it paid off for sure. So otherwise, this is pretty much the list. Even it's really straightforward. Not a whole lot to say about it. This is pretty much the standard kind of build aside from a few cards. I guess the other addition would be something like Karen. It's another way to get your Pokemon back in the deck. But, normally you have a natural loss to something like Night March because of Joltik, which kind of one-shots your Mega Rayquaza. So putting Karen back in the deck is really, or playing Karen, I should say, to put those Pokemon back in the deck. You're probably just as fast as Night March with this deck, but obviously you can't keep up at that point. So really, really standard, I would say, and expanded. So otherwise, this is pretty much it. So again, congratulations to Alex Wilson. And yeah, we'll go ahead and move on to the finalist, who was John Kettler, who played Decidueye Vileplume. Now, Decidueye definitely saw a lot of hype before Sun and Moon. A lot of people thought that it was just extremely good, inherently powerful because it's just, it's a stronger Greninja. You can get it out the first turn. It's got more HP. The ability stacks. You can use it every turn in the game and just spread damage everywhere. But, a lot of people thought it was kind of a flop because, what exactly do you play it with? It's kind of difficult to kind of commit all of these cards to a deck. Forest of Giant Plants, the Decidueye line, you end up spending like a fourth of your deck just getting the Decidueye line into the deck. So, a lot of players kind of struggled when it came out and they just kind of dismissed it. But John Kettler, he came up with this list and he actually posted a very similar list. He has a website and blog called Hey Fonte, so check that out if you want to. But I really think that this list is probably as good as it gets. I don't think I would change a single card in this list because it's just inherently strong. It's really straightforward. It gets to the point, and just to kind of walk you through what this deck does. Decidueye. Decidueye is not only a support Pokemon, not only are you spreading damage every turn and setting up knockouts, but it's also one of your main attackers. I mean, Razor Leaf for 90 is pretty straightforward. It's basically two-shotting anything. With one Feather Arrow, you can bring up a Shaman, knock it out. And then Hollow Hunt GX, I love this GX attack because just the ability to play cards again, is just really strong. I remember Sableye, which is still played in like Eviltal decks and expanded, that junk hunt ability is just so strong because it just gives you a massive advantage over the other player, being able to reuse cards over and over again. Now, it is pretty balanced because you can only use it once, but any three cards, that can mean like a couple double colorless if they've been knocked off by like Xerosic or Enhanced Hammer. It could mean that extra Lysander to go ahead and get the game. So, I mean, I really like it a lot, and a 4/4 line is pretty standard. I've never seen it below that before. I think it's just really, really consistent, especially with a 4 Forest of Giant Plants. And, your main attacker, I guess, in most cases will be Lugia. And Arrow Ball, a lot of people preferred Tauros at first because it did a clean 60, but Arrow Ball gets progressively stronger. It's already doing 40 by itself, but, the moment your opponent has, any kind of energy on the board or on their active, I should say, it's going to be doing more damage. And Deep Hurricane is incredibly important here. It's incredibly powerful. You can discard your opponent's stadium or your own Forest of Giant Plants, and it does 70 more damage. I mean, that's the only cost. You discard a stadium card. So basically, he's doing 150 damage, and 4 energy looks like a lot, but really it's 2 double colorless. So really 2 energy attachments, and you're good to go. So this plus a Feather Arrow is 170, which is kind of like the magic number to knock out an EX here. If they have a Fighting Fury Belt, it just takes 3 Feather Arrows, but most of the time, since you are going to be item locking your opponent, and since you do play things like Xerosic, they're not going to have the Fighting Fury Belt. So you should be able to one-shot pretty much anything in the game here, which is pretty insane. And then finally, the last piece of the puzzle to this deck is going to be Vileplume. And so he kind of opted for a 2/2/2 line, which I think is perfect. I don't think you really need anything else because, keep in mind, you play Revitalizer, you play a lot of ways to get it out. So if you prize a Vileplume, whatever, really your goal is to get a Vileplume out. You don't really need 2 Vileplume. You just get 1 out, you're good to go. If they do have to Lysander it up, that's fine. You don't even have to retreat it because, your Decidueyes are still doing work. So they're still putting damage on the board. So really clever. And, if it does get knocked out, that's not a big deal. I can use Revitalizer to get it back, take a couple prizes or search them out again. So definitely not a big deal. So that's pretty much this deck, Decidueye Vileplume, really strong deck. And I don't think a lot of players saw it coming. I think it was all over St. Louis, if I remember correctly. And, even this past weekend at Oceania International, so in Australia, it's just insane how many Vileplume decks there were, or Decidueye decks, I should say. I think 10 out of the top 32. I mean, that's almost a third of the decks were Decidueye. And I think it made it all the way to the finals. I think like 4 of them were in top 8. It made it to the finals. Pablo Mesa of Tablemon, check out his channel. He does a lot of great work. I think he lives in Mexico, like Pokemon Mexico. But I mean, it made it all the way to the finals. It lost to Volcanion, unfortunately, because Volcanion just gets set up so quick and it hits for weakness. But otherwise, otherwise this deck is just incredibly strong. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to the top four. So the players that got third and fourth place, of course. And we're going to kick it off with Rahul Reddy's Volcanion list. And this is one of the craziest lists I've seen. We've done a Volcanion deck profile from Standard, which was a few months ago, as well as one of our deck showdown videos where you can actually check it out with live commentary. But this is going to be a pretty different type of build. This is a Volcanion deck that features things like Execute, Keldeo, Starmie, which is pretty insane, Blacksmith, things like that. So a lot of things to talk about here. So, Volcanion is a deck that is just inherently powerful because it has the steam up ability, and basically I can discard a fire energy from my hand and then all of my basic fire Pokemon's attacks do 30 more damage. So that already sounds really good, but I can stack this up to 4 times if I have that many Volcanion in play. So doing an additional 120 damage is ridiculous. It's got so much synergy with this power heater attack, so I can do up to 140 damage for 1 energy and then attach 2 energy to the bench, which is just crazy. So it's got energy acceleration, it hits really hard, and that's why Volcanion does so well. And this was just a fantastic meta call because it hits hard. He predicted a lot of Decidueye, so really correct, really good prediction here for the meta. And the deck is just really consistent. I mean, we have your standard, 4 Volcanion EX, 3 Baby Volcanion, 2 Shaman, 1 Hoopa. That's pretty much the same kind of counts you see in standard. But as you can see, there are a couple of additions here. Execute is really good because suddenly I can use things like Superior Energy Retrieval, Computer Search, Ultra Ball, do a lot of work and have to pay less cost to actually use those cards. So really good. Keldeo is probably one of the best additions in this deck if you play like a Skyfield variant, because this Russian ability, it essentially gives you free retreat here. So if I attach a Floatstone, I'm good to go. And, if they do play Garbodor, which is actually pretty uncommon in Expanded, I can just play Tool Scrapper, knock it off, and I still have my free retreater here. So Keldeo is just really good, especially since Volcanion normally can't attack after its attack, so you can just kind of rush and retreat, remove that effect, and then just go ahead and attack again. So that is pretty much all the Pokemon here. Starmie I like because of its ability. It's essentially an energy retrieval every turn. Discard a card from my hand, so basically discard and execute, so good synergy. And put 2 basic energies, so in this case fire energy, into your hand. So basically I can just reuse the steam up abilities, attach energies, things like that. I'm not going to be running out of energy, so no worries there. And as far as our trainers here, compared to standard, we have a lot of things that make this deck just so much stronger. Battle Compressor gets the fire in the discard, lets you kind of pair that up with steam up, or not steam up, but power heater, blacksmith, things like that. Superior energy retrieval is essentially a fisherman almost. You do have to pay a cost, but a fisherman in item form, so it just kind of speeds the deck up, of course. And then Blacksmith is probably, in my opinion, one of the biggest additions to the deck. Blacksmith is going to let this deck pull off some insane combos. You might even get a first turn knockout because Blacksmith lets you attach 2 energies, then you do your attached return, and then you're already doing a ton of damage. So Blacksmith is probably the best addition to the deck. I really wish that Blacksmith had been reprinted in the standard format, but it might have been just too inherently powerful because Volcanion, it's got so much stuff already going for it in standard. So probably the best call there. But this is pretty much it. It's a pretty straightforward list, but he has a lot of additions here that make the deck way better than standard. And congratulations to him for a pretty awesome meta call and a really good deck, really creative deck here. And our other top 4 list is going to be by John Sinkowitz. Hopefully I'm not mispronouncing your name. If I do apologize. But he played Night March. So Night March has actually kind of died in play and expanded because, there's just a lot of hard counters to it right now. There's Seismitoad, of course. It always struggled against that. There's Karen. And, more recently, there's been Decidueye. Decidueye, if you get it out, you can spread damage, take out multiple Pokemon. Vileplume in itself itself. This deck plays like 30 plus item cards, so really hinders the deck from even setting up if you can get a turn on Vileplume, of course. Just so many things going against Night March right now, but it's a really good call because if you're not prepared against it, it really just kind of crushes you. Decks like Eviltall just kind of fall to it because Joltik hits it for weakness. If they try to hit you with Gallade, I can just hit you for weakness with Mew or Pumpkaboo. And it's just so fast. I can get a turn 1 attack off that's like 180, 200 damage. I can just capture up Shamans all day long. So it's a really fast deck. I think the deck is just really strong, and it's no wonder why it did so well. But the deck is pretty standard. The only thing that I think is a little strange might be the Mr. Mime. I'm trying to think of any kind of decks that would just kind of snipe. I know Landorus was pretty big at one point, but it doesn't really prevent things like damage counters. So if you play against like a Crobat or a Decidueye, keep in mind it's not going to be blocking this. So interesting choice for the Mr. Mime here. And another interesting choice is going to be Tauros, because normally this deck, it really relies on the prize trade, which basically means that you're hitting with a bunch of low HP non-EX attackers, and you're kind of forcing your opponent to knock out 6 of your Pokemon, while you just have to knock out 3 of theirs. So interesting that he played Tauros, but I could probably see why here. Horn Attack kind of sets up for a knockout, and Mad Bull GX is just insane. It's probably the best GX attack so far. Unless they do 180 damage, then you're probably going to get a knockout automatically. So interesting choice, and it works fine with Night March because all of its attacks are for a DCE. So definitely pairs up pretty nicely. And as far as any other choices, Night March is one of those decks where everything is pretty much the same. There's so many outs. You play Puzzle of Time to reuse resources, Special Charge to get back your DCE, Computer Search, of course, Battle Compressor. Everything's pretty standard here. The only thing that I see that might be a little bit different is the Parallel City. And, he might have anticipated Mega Rayquaza. He might have anticipated Decidueye because the other side actually reduces damage by grass Pokemon. So that's really the only reason I can see any kind of Skyfield variant, like Mega Gardevoir, again, Mega Rayquaza, I guess even Volcanion. This is pretty interesting against Volcanion because both sides actually kind of hurt Volcanion a lot. But otherwise, really interesting choice here. But Night March is still a very strong deck, and I think it's pretty safe to say it's one of those decks where it's easy to learn but hard to master. There is a lot of math involved. There's a lot of really subtleties involved with the deck, but if you are a beginner, this is pretty easy to pick up. Of course, the Shamans and Computer Searches are a little bit expensive, but other than that, it's not too expensive to build, and it's really straightforward. You can't really go wrong with it because it's not that hard to play. Once you play a few games with it, you basically just kind of battle compress your Night Marchers, do a bunch of damage, and you pretty much win. So that's pretty much going to be Night March. So these last 4 decks are going to be the ones that made top 8 at St. Louis Regionals, and hopefully at this point in the video you guys aren't too bored. I know it's kind of rough to sit through 8 different decks, but I thought I would just try to get all of these up and explain them in one bunch. That way you don't have to watch 4, 5, 6 different videos, of course. You can just kind of skip around if there's a list you want to see, of course. But this is going to be Accelgor Wobbuffet, and this deck is kind of an old deck, an oldie but goodie, because it's been around for a long time. I think Accelgor deck and cover, I think the deck has been around for like 4 years, maybe even 5 years, because this is all the way back to like Dark Explorers. This is one of the very first black and white sets. I think black and white came out in like 2011. So this is definitely a really old deck, but it gets a lot of interesting additions. For the most part, it's still the same old deck, but it does have a few additions that kind of make it, a little bit better than before. And again, this is one of those decks that you wouldn't really expect to be this far in a regionals, like a top 8, because, the format, every time there's a new set, the format just evolves. It changes so much, and it can definitely change the structure of a deck, how players play, etc. But it's basically the same deck here. And I think it was just a really good meta call because, people are not expecting it. People are playing like Floatstones, maybe a couple escape ropes if you're lucky, but they're not playing a whole lot of switch cards. So basically, if you go against Accelgor, you don't have your switch cards like AZ or Olympia or something, you're pretty much stuck, and you're pretty much going to lose because the math is just perfect. You can attack with Accelgor, with Mew. You can just kind of sit there with Wobbuffet. So I even see a Tauros here. So let me just kind of walk you through the deck. If you don't know what it does, deck can cover, it does 50 damage, so not a whole lot, but it goes back into the deck and paralyzes and poisons your opponent. So, your opponent basically gets stuck there, and if they can't retreat out, and by retreating, I mean something like a switch or AZ or something, then they're pretty much going to have to pass, and you just rinse and repeat. You do it over and over again. And this is a very slow deck, so you might not make it in a best of 3, might not actually finish. It's really important that you win that game 1, so that way maybe you don't finish game 2, maybe you just kind of sit there, kind of stall out by like paralyzing them, and you just kind of win that way. It's a really slow deck, but it definitely can win in the long term. And as you're getting set up, because it might take a few turns to get all of this stuff out, because there's evolution cards, a lot of stuff going here, you can just kind of block with Wobbuffet. I mean, as soon as you attack, you bring up Wobbuffet, and you shut off their abilities. So it's going to be very hard for them to play things like Shaman, Jirachi EX, I'm trying to think, Dragonite EX, anything that really uses abilities. Raikou, Bronzong, those are both big and expanded. Volcanion. So, I mean, it makes it very hard to actually do anything about the paralysis, the poison, your ability locked. So a lot of things going for it here. In Accelgor, you might think like, oh, it goes back in the deck. That sounds really inconsistent because, what am I supposed to do to attack the next turn? And that's where Mew comes in. Mew can actually copy anything on the field if you have the energy to use it. And in this case, you just copy Accelgor. So as long as you can just keep switching out Accelgors or keeping them on the bench, it should be relatively easy to actually attack with Mew. And that's, basically the gist of the deck. He plays Tauros. That's really interesting. Again, any of these decks that play DCE, it seems like they just kind of splash Tauros in, and it works really well because Tauros uses a DCE. You can just kind of stall and use Mad Bull GX for a cheap knockout. And the reasoning behind Muna and Masharna, Muna actually lets you possibly put your opponent's active to sleep. Now, you may or may not use that throughout the game. It might be something just in case you're about to lose, but it can be really handy. And then Masharna is really great because it's essentially letting you draw an extra card a turn and just kind of rearrange the top cards of your deck. Now, something that's really interesting here, I want to note there's 2 things. One is Verbank City Gem. So he could have opted for something like Forest of Giant Plants, maybe to get the deck faster, but he actually opted for Verbank, which actually basically does 20 more damage for poison. So he's doing 70 damage, and it's going to be doing 20 more in between turns. So that's going to be really key to setting up your math to actually get these knockouts and stuff. And lastly here, I mean, just look at the number of Pokemon in the deck. There's 21 Pokemon, so over a third of his deck is Pokemon, and he plays a lot of different ways to get these out. So really consistent here. He plays 4 Ultra Ball, 4 Level Ball. It's just insane. Computer Search, which basically acts as an Ultra Ball. So many outs to get these Pokemon out, and that's really going to come down to how he wins. He has to get Accelgors out. He has to be able to get the Mew in and out every time it attacks. And I mean, this deck is really consistent, but it's just so hard to, kind of fathom how he managed to squeeze all of this stuff into the deck and still make it work, of course. But, keep in mind, he only plays 4 energy. You just play 4 energy, 4 DCE in the deck because that's all you need. If the deck was forced to play grass energy, I really don't think it would work because 2 attachments is just too long. By the time they get the second attachment, they are probably either extremely damaged or already knocked out. So DCE, as long as it's in the format, decks like this will exist, and they'll definitely thrive. And another deck that we have that made top 8 here is going to be Seismitoad Aggro. So we already made a deck profile for this, so check it out on the channel. And, it's a pretty similarly built deck, but there are some changes that I do want to note here. So Seismitoad, of course, you have item lock. There are Vileplume variants. Obviously, John Kettler made second, as we just showed just a few minutes ago. But, the theme of, item locking while using Decidueye, that seems to be what is just really, really the strongest method of playing Decidueye here because, you're spreading damage, you're item locking. It doesn't really give your opponent a whole lot of outs to win. champion. And so a lot of players really took advantage of that. And this is another variant of that. This is Seismitoad Decidueye. So Seismitoad is very infamous because, it's won so many tournaments. It won national championships in 2015, I think, Jason Klasinski. It's won regional championships. I think he won a regionals the same year with it. And that kind of led to the Lysander's trump card ban because, just the combination of item locking, laser banking, rinse and repeat, burn through the deck every turn, just Lysander's trump card. As you can imagine with this card, that's why it really became so infamous. But Quaking Punch, you attach, you item lock, and it's a done deal. But as you can see here, Quaking Punch by itself doesn't really do enough damage. So that's where Decidueye comes in. A lot of players actually opted to play things like Golbat and Crobat. And, they definitely have their uses because they can put a little more damage out. Maybe they can come out over time. They've got free retreat. They're non-EX attackers, things like that. They give you a bit more control, in my opinion. But keep in mind that Decidueye, it's constant. I'm putting 20 every turn. It's a little bit clunky playing a 4/4/4 line and Forest of Giant Plants. A Crobat build might play something like Silent Lab or Hypnotoxic Lasers, but overall I think Decidueye is the better build. And something to keep in mind here is that he did play a copy of Dedenne, and Dedenne has this attack called Energy Short, 20 damage times the number of energy attached to your opponent's active. So, normally I would say Yveltal would have a good matchup against this because I'm two-shotting my opponent and they're probably not two-shotting me. But in this case, Dedenne is going to be doing work. Dedenne is going to be one-shotting Yveltals pretty easily, probably Mega Rayquazas as well. So I think he made a really good choice here. And something to note here is that he plays Pokemon Communication. So he doesn't play 4 Ultra Ball, 2 Level Ball, which would be kind of like a standard choice here. He actually opted to play 3 Ultra Ball, 3 Communication. And this is a card you don't see a lot. But, obviously, there's a lot of synergy because he plays a ton of Pokemon. So basically put a Pokemon in your hand back in your deck and pull out another Pokemon. So really, really strong if you look at it that way. He also played Scoop Up Cyclone and Super Scoop Up, so and it looks like AZ as well, so 6 different outs to actually scoop up his Pokemon. So anytime that his Pokemon got damaged, anytime he wanted to reuse the ability to do an extra 20 damage, there are plenty of outs to do that, and it just makes for a very defensive deck because I'm spreading damage, I'm doing little bits of damage at a time, I'm item locking, and by the way, you can't knock me out because I'm just going to keep super scoop upping. And it's going to get to the point where, I've got so much of an advantage, you just have to scoop to me. And that's pretty much how it goes. And other than that, pretty straightforward here. He's knocking off energy of Flare Grunts. I do think the blend energy is really smart here because, it just works. The deck is just super strong. And, now that I look at it, I think that I actually forgot to put a card in here, or when I copied the deck list, it didn't really copy everything. There's actually a copy of Wobbuffet in here, and that's another reason why the blend energy is in here. So Wobbuffet can, Decidueye spreads the damage, Wobbuffet hits for the damage. So it kind of explains why there's a blend energy here versus like grass or something. So really smart play, and I think Seismitoad Decidueye will definitely see play in the future. Now, another deck that made top 8 here is going to be Laurentiis Vileplume. So we're sticking with the theme of item lock, Forest of Giant Plants. Again, it makes item locking so easy with Vileplume, or, getting your Decidueyes out. And in this case, it's getting your Laurentiis out. And the deck was actually piloted by Ross Cawthon. So if you don't know Ross, very prominent player, very consistent player. He almost seems to top nationals and worlds every year. I don't think he's quite won a worlds yet, but he's come pretty darn close. I think last year he got third place maybe, and a few years ago, of course, he got second place with The Truth. But this year he's definitely done well as far as accomplishments go. And, this deck is kind of a testament to that. There's a lot of weird cards in the deck here, but Laurentiis is, pretty good. I think a lot of players in Expanded actually tested it with Silver Bengal, which is really clever because Silver Bengal does not work on an EX. It has the benefit of doing 30 more damage to an EX, but it does not work on an EX. You can't actually attach it. But Laurentiis isn't an EX, it's a GX. So technically you get around it and you do that extra damage, which is good. And a lot of players actually opted to play it with evolutions. They played like Jolteon, Vaporeon, Flareon. I think in the very first stream match, they actually had John Roberts II, who was a national champion, a former national champion, and that's how he played it. He actually played against Israel Sosa, I think. And yeah, the first game he just kind of crushed him because Israel just did not see it coming. The Laurentiis had he had a Jolteon on his side of the field, and the Yveltal just kind of fell every single turn. You know, the Yveltals and the Shamans, it was just way too much to put up with. I think they ended up tying maybe, but anyway, Laurentiis is really strong. Flower Supply 40. Attach 2 basic energies to any of your Pokemon any way you like. So I can attach it to myself on the first turn and be ready for a Solar Blade attack. And Solar Blade is 120, it's doing a clean amount of damage for a 2-shot, but more importantly, you're healing 30, so it becomes really hard for your opponent to actually knock you out in 1 or 2 hits. Probably going to take a couple hits. And then the GX attack is also strong, 50 damage times the number of grass energy attached to it. So basically I have Flower Supply for 40. The second turn I can do 150, and that's going to be more than enough to knock out most Pokemon EXs and take a really early start there. And again, Vileplume has a lot of synergy. You play Forest Giant Plants, you play a lot of search cards, a lot of speed cards to burn through your deck to get them both out. And something that Ross did that's really, really clever and expanded, you actually have AZ here. So AZ put 1 Pokemon into your hand and discard everything. Well, that's fine because I can AZ my Laurentiis, put all the energy in the discard, and then just do it again. Attach those energies to Laurentiis and do a lot of damage. So really clever, and it also kind of prevents Vileplume from being locked in the active spot as well. Otherwise, his tech cards here, Silver Bangle, of course. Palpad is a really interesting addition. You don't really see Palpad. You see like Verse Seeker, or you've even seen like Random Receiver, but Palpad has not really seen any play whatsoever. But the effect is just really strong. Shuffle 2 supporters from your discard into your deck. So I think he probably played it because you can AZ the Vileplume, make it so that you can play item cards again, and then you just play Palpad, put AZs or something back in the deck, and put down the Vileplume again. So really clever just to kind of reuse your AZs, your Lysanders, things like that. But otherwise, pretty straightforward deck. Acrobike, Battle Compressor, a lot of outs to kind of burn through the deck and make sure you get a turn 1 attack. And otherwise, that's pretty much it. And closing in with our final deck is going to be Yveltal with Maxie's Hidden Ball Trick and, cards like Archeops and Gallade, getting those out using Maxie's. So this was actually piloted by Israel Sosa. So we just kind of mentioned him. He kind of got that tied game in the first match with John Roberts II, but he ended up making it all the way to top 8. And he's really just kind of known for playing Yveltal all the time. So I think a few seasons ago, he actually won 3 regional championships in a row with Yveltal. So, and there's nothing wrong with that because Yveltal is consistent. And it seems like Pokemon, the developers, they love dark types so much that they just keep making them stronger and stronger. I think there's actually a Darkrai being printed in Guardians Rising, which is the second Sun and Moon set, and it's actually pretty good as well. So it actually accelerates energy to itself every turn, I think, or not every turn, but from the discard as soon as you play it or something. But this deck is not going to die unless Black and White rotates out, but I don't really see that happening in Expanded. Seems like they're going to keep it that way. I don't know. But as far as how this deck works, basically the strategy is, depending on what I'm playing against, I'm going to play Maxie's Hidden Ball Trick, and it's going to let me get a fighting Pokemon out, and it doesn't really matter what kind of fighting Pokemon. So that means like stage 2s, stage 1s, whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and get Gallade out if I really need to. That Premonition ability lets me essentially rearrange my cards, and it makes the deck just way more consistent. And if I'm playing against like an evolution deck like Decidueye or Mega Rayquaza or something, then I get Archeops, and my opponent cannot evolve their Pokemon from their hand. So if they don't play Wally, they don't play Evo Soda, they've pretty much lost the game because they can't really compete against that. And of course, you play Dark Patch, you play Battle Compressor, Computer Surge. It makes it super easy to get this working and makes it super easy to get energy on the board. Yveltal, Darkrai, they don't take many attachments with Dark Patch. You just Dark Patch, you attach, you're good to go. You play Tauros. Tauros, again, has synergy with the DCE. Pretty much any deck that plays DCE can squeeze in a Tauros and be good to go. And then Sableye, just in case you are finding yourself having some bad turns, I can junk hunt for my computer surge. I can junk hunt for more dark patches. It's just insanely good how much synergy there is with darks in general. Everything kind of works together, and Darkrai gives everything free retreat. So, everything just kind of synergizes together here. And there's not really much to say about this deck except it's a very basic expanded deck. Everything in here just kind of screams expanded. You've got Getsus, which is pretty much a one of in a lot of decks in expanded. I don't think I really saw any in the top 8 lists except for this one, but Getsus is just so strong in the first turn because it's going to prevent them from actually getting set up. And against something like a Decidueye deck, this is really strong because I can play an Ultra Ball, get Jirachi, search Getsus out with Jirachi, and then Getsus can kind of wipe their items. So their turn 1 Vileplume probably not going to happen at that point because their hand's probably going to be wiped to like 2 or 3 cards. So probably not going to happen. Silent Lab, also really good just to kind of shut down their Shamans, shut down their Jirachi, their Keldeo, etc. So, this is a very well thought out deck. And it's another deck where it's, somewhat easy to pick up, but it takes a lot of skill to actually get Archeops and Gallade out, especially on the first turn of the game. A lot of math involved with Yveltal, trying to get the right numbers and things like that. So Israel's definitely experienced with the deck, so big shout out to him for making it this far. And I'm sure in the next regionals he'll probably play that too. So yeah, definitely expect it to be, a prominent deck as long as the format is black and white on and expanded. So that pretty much wraps it up, guys. Thanks so much for actually staying this far in the video. I realize it was like 30 plus minutes long. I'm not even sure how long it's going to be after editing everything, but yeah, be sure to subscribe, like our channel, and like our Facebook page at Top Deck Nation. And next week, we're actually going to be relaunching our website. So if you're into free content, free strategy articles, guides, things like that, be sure to check us out at topdecknation.com. We really, really appreciate it. My goal is to, hopefully get some more writers, more content and things like that up. I'd like to have a couple of articles up a week. I'd like to try to get a few more videos up every week. I know life can be kind of tough sometimes. There's graduate school and, other responsibilities I've got, but, it's definitely a passion of mine to kind of share this kind of information with you, share my advice and things like that for the game, and hopefully, get new players into the game as well. It's definitely had an impact on me. I've made a lot of friends with Pokemon, had some success at tournaments and things like that, but it's just such a fun game, such a family-friendly game, and I really like it. So, yeah, that should pretty much wrap it up. But yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys thought. But in the meantime, this has been Zach with Top Deck Nation, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.